This Leafs team undoubtedly has its flaws, and as we've seen through the first 7 games, Morgan Rielly needs to be a whole lot better, and Auston Matthews has to get on track. But this is the real reason that this current Toronto Maple Leafs team will not win a Stanley Cup. What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. I'm Zack Phillips, and if you're new to this channel or you've been here before, make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and while you're at it, you might as well go ahead and hit like on this video. Turn on that bell to get notifications every single time we go live post-game or we have news, rumors, or reaction videos coming onto this channel. Now, getting into the meat of today's episode, the real reason that this Leafs team will not win the Stanley Cup anytime soon with this current roster as it is. Let's not mince words. The real reason, in my opinion, that this Leafs team, as it's built, will not win the Stanley Cup is because of their defense. It is enough blaming Kyle Dubas for not getting physical, gritty, Josh Anderson, Tom Wilson type forwards. There's only so many of those guys in the league who can actually skate and play. He tried. He made different efforts to go out and acquire different types of players. Some of them panned out for a short period of time. Some of them never worked at all, i.e. Kyle Clifford's or Nick Foligno's. But when we went out and acquired that Kyle Clifford, Nick Foligno, Wayne Simmons, the Leafs fan base praised Kyle Dubas. It didn't work out. Nick Foligno got injured. The wheels fell off Wayne Simmons a couple years into that contract after he's been here, and we re-upped him. And Kyle Clifford ultimately ended up leaving after his playoff run. He came back. It just hasn't been the right fit for him as he's aging and getting further along in his career. But the biggest reason that this Leafs team cannot win a Stanley Cup as is because of the defense. This defense has no impactful, game-changing type of players. They have some good defensemen, they have some up-and-coming defensemen, and they have some supporting cast defensemen, but they don't have anybody who can truly change or dictate the outcome of a game from the defensive end. The most recent Stanley Cup winners have all had a defenseman who is the guy who can go out there and steal a game. Looking back at St. Louis with Alex Pietrangelo, or Washington with John Carlson, or obviously out in Colorado with Cale Makar, and then Tampa Bay with Victor Hedman. They all have that Norris Trophy caliber defenseman who is incredible both offensively and defensively, and rightfully logs a large number of minutes, can play power play, penalty kill, has a good shot, and good at skating out with the puck, as well as actually being good at being a defenseman. This Leafs team does not have that. Now, I touched on the fact that Morgan Rielly is going to need to be better, and that is true. I still believe that. But the problem is, Morgan Rielly should not have ever been the number one guy or planned on being the number one guy in this Leafs lineup. Now, if you are going to make him the number one guy and you think, hey, we don't need a true number one, we can filter it out with guys who are supporting cast players, that's fine. It's a little bit unconventional. You might have to look back at the Pittsburgh team that won it, the most recent one, where kind of Chris Letang wasn't fully into it. He was a little bit injured. And then you're going through the rest of the roster and you're looking at guys saying, hey, they don't truly have that number one. They won by committee. But this Leafs team, this defensive group as is nowhere near even what that Pittsburgh team was when they won the Stanley Cup. So if you're going to go with the strategy of, hey, Morgan Rielly's going to be a guy in there, he's going to be the leader, but he's not a true number one, and we're going to filter it around, this Leafs decor still is not good enough. We need an impact player. We need a driving force player, and we do not have one on the defensive end. Going out and acquiring the Scott Mayfields or the guys that can fit in fifth and sixth, the Dylan DeMellos and Brennan Dillons that Winnipeg had gone and gotten, those guys right now is not what we need. Those guys are fifth and sixth defensemen on this team. Giordano ends up being a very, very solid fifth and sixth defenseman. He's very good here, but he's not an impact player to take this team over the edge, over the top, to the next level. So, this Leafs team as a whole needs to be better top to bottom from the defensive side and truly needs the number one guy. This is why I've strongly backed the idea of going out and acquiring a Jakob Chychrun. You have to sacrifice some quality players to go out and acquire that, but that's a game-changing type of player right there. That's a guy who changes the overall look of your roster for 82 games of the season. He's a guy who can make an impact physically, defensively, and offensively. You slide down everyone else in that lineup and make them play a little bit less of an important role to the point where now you can filter a little bit of the committee factor where you were looking at Pittsburgh. It makes the necessity of going out and acquiring more number 4, number 5, number 6 defensemen to fit into this lineup. It lowers the need for that a little bit because you have that number one guy. Now, I want to talk about Morgan Rielly and how he fits into all of this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get major Dion Phaneuf vibes. And what I mean by that is that when Dion Phaneuf was acquired here, there was a large amount of hype placed onto Dion Phaneuf as soon as he got here. The idea was that he was going to come here, he was going to be this bone-crunching number one Norris defenseman who's going to take over and be that guy for the Leafs. Now, some major problems that occurred as soon as he got here. He was made to be the number one guy. And he never really was at any point in his career. And as it panned out, he never truly was or should have been the number one guy. Now, I may be wrong, and some people may disagree with me. That's fine. You can let me know in the comments below. But I think if Dion Phaneuf had been a number 2 guy while he was here in Toronto, he would have been an incredible defenseman for the Maple Leafs team. The other piece that ended up happening, he gets thrown the captaincy right away. So he gets put into the eyes of the entire Toronto media and the fan base the second he gets here. Dion, you're the number one guy and you're the captain. It's all on you, buddy. And then the final straw that broke Dion Phaneuf's back was having to play alongside Carl Gunnarsson and expected to be a number 1 D pair. Carl Gunnarsson, guys. What were we thinking? So now, how does this relate to Morgan Rielly? Well, to me, Morgan Rielly would be the best number 2 defenseman in the NHL if he was put in the number 2 spot. Right now, as it is, Morgan Rielly shoulders the entire weight of the fan base. He is the longest standing Maple Leaf. He is on probably one of the most valuable defenseman contracts in the NHL, although through the first 7 games of this season, he's not playing that well, maybe not living up to it as we'd like him to, but ultimately for what he can be on a more regular basis, that contract that he signed, you have to admit he would have got a lot more on the market. He signed a team-friendly deal to be here, and that contract as is still reasonable as a number 2 defenseman. Maybe a 1B, if you'd like to call him that, rather than a number 2. I'm fine with the 1B. But him having to be the guy who's always taking the load from the fan bases, from management, from the media, as he's the guy. He's been here the longest. It's all about him. He's leading this. He's the heartbeat of the room. That's fine. He can still be that guy. But then to put that pressure onto him, also onto the ice to be the number 1, I think it hurts his play a little bit. Now, the other factor, not quite the same situation, but he's playing alongside an aging TJ Brodie. TJ Brodie is not Carl Gunnarsson. I will give TJ Brodie far more credit than that. But TJ Brodie is regressing a little bit in his career here, and it's becoming a whole lot more evident in the minutes that he's having to log here and having to be the ultra defensively responsible guy alongside Morgan Rielly so that Morgan Rielly can somehow fulfill this role that he feels that he needs to play of the number 1 guy. It's hurting Brodie's game, which is hurting Rielly's game, which is hurting Brodie's game, and it's just this back and forth battle between the two of them of how it can nonstop hurt the other one's game. It's just a bad situation. A number 1 guy alongside Morgan Rielly, I believe, will allow Morgan Rielly to flourish. Let's go back to Jakob Chychrun. He's a guy who can play top pairing minutes. He can play the right side. He's physical. He's smart defensively, and he can create offense. This limits the amount that Morgan Rielly has to feel the pressure to create offense. It limits his need to be on the power play. He could probably just slide to the second power play and get 30 seconds after the first unit has gone out there, because Chychrun will shoulder the load of the first power play unit with his really good shot, playmaking, decision, puck moving ability. He can go out there and take that. And immediately, pressure can start to come off of Morgan Rielly's on-ice ability. He can just become a leader. He can be a very, very good defenseman who is a leader. You don't need your captain to be the number one guy or your leader to be the number one guy. Just look up front. Auston Matthews is the number one forward. John Tavares wears the C. He's a second line center. That's fine. That happens around the league all the time. It doesn't have to be the number one guy who is the leader. Morgan Rielly can still lead by example. He can lead off ice. He can do all that stuff. But he won't have to feel as much pressure because he has someone alongside of him to take that over. I think if Morgan Rielly gets a number one, a true number one beside him, he will be in a much better position. Now, the final point that I want to make here in all of this, and I brought his name up a few times, but people continue to worry about him, and I feel like when I made the title for this video, and I was going to make this all about the defense here, people will automatically get the idea the forwards aren't good enough and Auston Matthews isn't scoring. I just want to say, stop worrying about Auston Matthews. One thing that I've noticed, although he hasn't been as dominant and he hasn't been able to score the pace that he did throughout the majority of last season, the guy is performing at a rate well above his expected goals. They will start to go in. How he is performing right now, he cannot possibly continue to take that many shot attempts, get as many shots on goal, and have them not go in for how elite of a shooter and a scorer he is. It will turn around. So stop worrying. The other piece, that guy, if you watch him on a nightly basis, shift by shift, he is buying into the rest of what it takes to be a winning hockey player on a winning hockey team. He is physical. He's blocking shots. He's taking hits. He's been one of the leaders on this team through the first 7 games in hits from the forward group. Auston Matthews is bought in on the other end. The scoring will come. So please stop worrying there. But I guess to wrap it all up, the main reason this Leafs team cannot and will not win the Stanley Cup as is right now is because of that defensive group. You can say what you want about the forwards. You can say what you want about the construction. I understand that there's some flaws there. I think, though, through the course of the season, it will sort itself out. There's a lot of depth. There's guys in the AHL who can be called up, and there's guys who just aren't performing to their full potential right now. There's also guys who are just severely underperforming from what they actually truly should be. Not even just their potential, but their regular standard level. They're just not performing at that right now. The real reason will be the defense. That will be the demise of this team. We've watched it for far too long where they get sloppy, they get lost, they get all over the place, and then they put too much pressure, and then when the offense can't score, the defense becomes exposed for what it truly is. A mess. The defensive group for this Leafs team is a mess. And they don't have that number one workhorse back there that basically all Stanley Cup winning teams require, who can log big minutes, play all important penalty killing, power playing situations, can go up and down the ice with the puck, can hit guys, and can be a physical presence who changes the course of the game. We don't have that. And asking Morgan Rielly to be that could be the death of us. Leafs fans, thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. If you like the content, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you hit like on this video and let me know your thoughts below. And if you agree with me, what defenseman would you like us to go out there and get? I'm all aboard the Jacob Chychrun train. Make the trade happen. I mean, not at the price Arizona's asking right now, but Kyle Dubas, that man is a wizard. I can guarantee you he could call up the guys down in Arizona and work some type of trade out. Maybe offer them some type of facility or something. I don't know. They definitely want to get out of that Arizona State arena down in Arizona. But let me know your thoughts. Who is the guy that you want us to go out and get? And do we need a number one guy? Let me know in the comments. Hit like, hit subscribe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Keep believing.